So in part one, I talked about the samadhi and the one not one mind and our connection to this cosmic consciousness. As I said, last week I received three important lessons, and the samadhi and the cosmic consciousness was actually the first aspect of that. The second aspect was a little bit different, and it was where I was shown a volume knob. And I want you to think of a volume knob on your car radio or a car stereo. Yes, the good old fashioned volume knob that we had on devices, not the ones that we use on our electronic ones today, where we push a button, but an actual knob. So, this volume knob is basically meant to represent our psychic connection and the depth of connection that we can have. Now, obviously, if the volume knob is off, this is someone who has no awareness to their psychic abilities or to their psychic connections. That doesn't mean that we aren't still connected to the one mind. This is incredibly important to remember, which is why the sun lesson came first, or the samadhi came first, right? So we're always connected. The question is not, are we connected, but how aware of that connection are we? So when our knob is in the off position, this represents someone who is really not completely connected or has any awareness of it. Now, that does, again, like I said, it doesn't mean that we aren't still receiving and connected to that one conscious mind, because we are, right? We have simply ignored it. We have simply left it in the off position. So now I want you to imagine turning that knob to roughly the number 3. At the number 3 volume, all of a sudden we start to become aware that we're getting little blips of information. The number 3 on the volume knob basically represents what I'm going to call spontaneous psychic experiences, or even spontaneous spiritual experiences, if you prefer. So these are uncontrollable. They happen to us. We become aware of them at some level, but we haven't really learned how to utilize or control them. We simply are kind of, and I hate to use this word, but we're kind of victims to them, right? When they happen, they happen. And so this means that there has been this awakening within us for whatever reason. And maybe it's just the desire to have that connection where the knowing begins to move into the forefront of our being. Okay. And some people will say, well, gee, this happens to me all the time and I don't want it. And certainly that's okay as well. But you're still at that volume level 3, so to speak, as far as whether or not you're able to utilize it well. Okay. So now I want you to crank up the volume, and I want you to move that volume to a level 6. At this point, someone is now able to utilize and connect at will. You have control. You're able to turn it off and turn it on. And so you have this ability to maintain the connection, but also to turn off or control that volume knob a little bit more. You're usually highly connected at this point, capable of using the ability at will and benefiting for it at the personal level as well as for others. Now, I want you to take that volume knob and I want you to crank it up all the way to, let's say, level 10, the highest level that it's going to go to. At the 10 level is what I'm going to call complete embodiment of the one mind. Ideally, none of us are probably ever going to reach that point. We might think of people such as Buddha or Jesus who have actually reached that level. And basically what that means, it is a full embodiment, right? It is a full embodiment of our connection to the one mind, being very, very connected. Now, in the psychic community, what may happen is we may consider channeling, transmediumship will be at that very high volume level, because what has happened is we have set the ego aside, we have connected, turned the psychic volume knob all the way up, and we are in touch, so much so with the one consciousness, with that one mind, with whatever it is that we are connecting with, that it has overtaken us and we simply become that channel. And that can happen with either energy or information, which I'm going to speak to in just a moment. So the volume knob is this: how connected are we to the one mind? It is the goal, obviously, for us to be capable of moving into this space where we become one with the cosmic mind as often as we can. And when we reside in that space, We lose the ego. Now, we still have an identity. We still are who we are. We still enjoy our passions. We still enjoy life. We can still laugh and love and have relationships, but we're guided by something which is greater and more powerful than ourselves. Now, maintaining that level 10 or 11 is very difficult. Let's face it, we're here to live a human life. We're going to have challenges, and most likely for most of us, being at that volume level 11 or 10 is not going to be possible for any sustained periods of time. For those who are channeling, or whether they're channeling information, whether they're channeling a specific spiritual being, or whether or not they're just channeling energy, all of these things are things that we're in a highly connected state, but we tend to do them for only short periods of time. So then we back that down into those aspects which we do that are interactive with others, things that we think of that are typically more psychic based, in the sense of doing mediumship, doing readings with another individual. Ideally, we should be connected, remember, to the one consciousness, right? To the cosmic consciousness, because that's where the all knowing comes from. If we're working at that psychic level and we're reading the energy of the person that's across from us, that's got loads of information in it, right? We have all kinds of awareness and validation when we're reading the person. But what we want to do is we want to give people, when we're doing a psychic reading, we want to solve problems for them. We want to give them answers, directions, and guidance. Giving somebody and spouting them a bunch of facts is maybe impressive and maybe accurate and is necessary part of the evidential aspect of the work. But the real goal here is to give people solutions. And you need to be sure that those solutions aren't coming from an ego-based perspective, which means my mind or the intentions and desires of your sitter. Because if your sitter is asking you, for example, about a loved one or a relationship, and they have a great deal of intention for how they want that to turn out, if you're reading their intention, you're just parroting that back to them. You're giving that to them at the psychic level that is connected ego to ego. This is a very shallow form of solution-based processing. We don't want that. We want to get our solutions and our guidance from the one mind, from the greater mind. That's the mind that knows what needs to happen next, which is why I tell people when I do sessions with them, I don't know what's going to come through for you. I'm going to connect with your spiritual team. I'm going to give you as much evidence as I can, but they're going to give you the information. The greater cosmic consciousness knows what you need. That's where I'm going to go. That's how I want to get those answers for you. Doesn't mean that I'm not going to be evidence-based and get that information, but I'm ultimately going to look towards the greater cosmic mind for the solution. So when we think of that volume knob, when we move into those controlled spaces at around the volume 6 level, we are connected to the one mind, but we're also still here kind of in our ego, right? Because we need to be able to interact. I need to be consciously able of listening to you, hearing what you're saying, giving you the information that I'm getting. So I'm working back and forth between my level of awareness and the level of the cosmic consciousness. And so we need that volume knob somewhere around in that 6 or 7. And then when we become more connected, we get more and more information. And there's nothing wrong with being highly connected when you are in your sessions with other people or connecting, right, for giving them solutions. But you tend to drop into a space where the ego has to step aside and you're just channeling the information, and stopping and pausing breaks that flow and drops you back down into ego a little bit. So I hope that wasn't confusing. Like I said, when I receive these lessons, I get them, not only do I get the visuals, but I get them as far as form as clairaudience is concerned. And then there's a great deal of claircognizance for me, in the sense that I just understand the concept that's being conveyed. The difficulty, of course, is me taking the lesson that's been given to me and then putting that back out there so that you will be able to understand it. So I've shared the comparison with the volume knob and our connection to give you an idea of where we are in the connection levels, on how we fall to that off position, to the spontaneous, to controlled and interactive, all the way over to this channeled state. It is a highly connected state. Now, the next question becomes, how do we get into these various different states? And that's, of course, now we know we want to connect with one mind. We want to figure out where on the volume knob we are and how we can continue to amp that up. But we're also the ones that are in control of that volume. We need to be capable of turning it off when it's not necessary and turning it on when it is. And I will tell you that I check in quite regularly. I'm in ego for a period of time, but then I'll stop and I'll make a conscious effort to check in. What do I need to know? What do I need to be aware? I don't drop into a trance or channeled state, but I'm checking in all the time. I'm allowing that psychic volume knob to turn on by pausing the ego and connecting with the one mind. And if you can do that by giving yourself a word or something that you can use that helps you to remember to check in. For me, again, like I said, I've learned that samadhi is a great word. It's a great way for you to check and say, what's going on in this moment that is outside of myself, that is greater than me, that I need to know and has guidance for me. So that's the volume knob lesson, which was lesson number 2. I'll move on to lesson number 3.